Rain tapped gently against the window as Emma stood in the dimly lit hallway, staring at the doorbell's chime still echoing in her ears. The air smelled faintly of damp leaves and dish soap, the kind of scent that clings when you've been cleaning just to keep your mind busy. She took a deep breath, smoothed the front of her sweater, and opened the door. Joe stood there, stocky and broad-shouldered, his toolbox in one hand and a friendly, worn-in smile on his face. He looked like the kind of man who could fix anything, not just leaky sinks. The drizzle behind him beaded on his jacket, glistening under the porch light. "Kitchen sink still giving you trouble?" he asked, stepping inside without fuss. She nodded, leading him toward the kitchen. The floor near the sink was damp from a slow leak, a bucket catching the steady drip. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, trying to seem composed, but the effort was betrayed by the redness around her eyes. She hoped he wouldn't notice. Joe set his tools down and crouched beside the cabinet. The low hum of his work filled the silence between them, and for a few precious moments, she could pretend this was just an ordinary visit from a tradesman. But deep inside, the heaviness she carried, lonely, unspoken, and exhausting, sat like a stone in her chest. She told herself she'd smile, say thank you, and send him on his way. She didn't yet know this visit would change her entire week. Joe's hands moved with practiced ease as he adjusted a wrench, the faint clink of metal echoing in the quiet kitchen. Emma stood nearby, arms crossed loosely, not out of defensiveness, but as if holding herself together. She watched the way he worked, grateful for the distraction from her own thoughts. He glanced up once to ask for a flashlight, and she passed it to him without meeting his eyes. She didn't want him to see the puffiness in them, the way the skin around them was still tender. A few minutes later, he twisted a pipe into place, sat back on his heels, and looked up at her again. This time, his gaze lingered. "You okay?" he asked, almost casually, like a neighbor might while passing on the sidewalk. She gave the automatic answer, the one she'd perfected over the past year. "I'm fine," she said quickly, forcing her lips into something resembling a smile. But Joe didn't look convinced. He wiped his hands on a rag and tilted his head slightly. "Then why," he asked gently, "are your eyes swollen from crying?" The words stopped her cold. She felt the air catch in her throat, her carefully built wall faltering. No one had asked her that, really asked her, in months. For a heartbeat, she considered laughing it off, brushing past it. But the question was too real, too tender, and it touched the part of her that was tired of pretending. Something inside her shifted, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't know what to say. Emma sank down onto the cool tile floor, her back against the cabinet, as if her legs had quietly decided they could no longer hold her up. She pulled her knees in, resting her arms around them. Joe didn't move closer, didn't push, he just stayed where he was, sitting cross-legged a few feet away, rag still in his hands, his expression open and patient. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt safe. "It's been a year," she began softly, her voice catching on the first words. "Last winter, my husband, he got sick. Cancer. We thought we had more time, but," she trailed off, eyes fixed on the tile pattern beneath her feet. "Since then, it's been just me and my little boy. I work from home, pick up extra shifts where I can. The bills keep piling up. And some days," she stopped, swallowing hard. "Some days I just can't keep pretending everything's okay." Joe didn't interrupt. He just listened, the way someone listens when they have no agenda, no advice. Only the desire to bear witness. Emma realized she was telling him things she hadn't said out loud to anyone. Maybe it was because he was a stranger. Maybe it was because his voice carried no judgment, only quiet understanding. When she finally stopped talking, the sound of rain outside filled the room again. She wiped at her eyes, embarrassed, but Joe simply nodded, as if to say, "I hear you. I see you." And in that small, silent moment, she felt just a little less alone. When Joe finally tightened the last bolt, the steady drip that had haunted her kitchen for weeks was gone. He tested the faucet, wiped down the counter, and began packing his tools with the same quiet efficiency he'd shown all afternoon. Emma, still a bit drained from everything she'd shared, hovered awkwardly by the table, searching for the right words to thank him. He reached into his toolbox, pulled out an invoice pad, and scribbled something quickly. Tearing off the sheet, he handed it to her without meeting her eyes. She glanced down, expecting a number that would make her stomach clench. Instead, the page was blank except for 3 handwritten words, paid in full. She looked up sharply. "I can't, Joe, I can't let you do this." But he just shook his head, slinging the toolbox handle over his shoulder. "Years ago," he said simply, "I was in a bad spot. Couldn't pay for a repair I desperately needed. Some guy fixed it anyway, told me to pass it on when I could. I've been doing that ever since." Emma's protest caught in her throat. He was already walking toward the door, pulling his jacket tighter against the drizzle outside. Just before stepping off the porch, he turned back and added, "Keep it going, okay?" Then he was gone, swallowed by the soft, gray rain. She stood there in the doorway for a long moment, holding the paper like it was something more valuable than money, because somehow, it was. That night, after her son was asleep and the house had settled into its familiar quiet, Emma sat at the kitchen table with the small stack of bills in front of her. The envelope with the cash she'd set aside for Joe lay on top. She ran her fingers over it, thinking about his parting words, "Keep it going." Across the street, her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker, kept her porch light on late. Emma had noticed her carrying smaller and smaller grocery bags lately, moving slower each week. Without letting herself overthink it, Emma slipped the envelope into her coat pocket, stepped into the cool night air, and crossed the street. She tucked the envelope into Mrs. Whitaker's mailbox, no note, no name. Just a quiet hope that it might make her week a little lighter. Walking back home, Emma felt a warmth in her chest that hadn't been there in a long time, not the heavy, aching kind, but something gentler, brighter. She realized kindness wasn't just a gift you received. It was something that could ripple outward, touching lives you might never fully see. Later, as she pulled the blanket over her sleeping son, she paused to watch the slow, steady rise and fall of his breath. Her eyes were still wet, but this time, they didn't sting. They shone. And for the first time in months, she felt that maybe, just maybe, the world could still surprise her in beautiful ways.